Men of Reddit, what are the struggles of dating a very rich girl? Pretending to pull out your wallet when it's time to pay for anything. Then asking, "Are you sure?" Admitting financial struggles. When my wife and I were dating in university, her family invited me up to their cottage during the break between Christmas and New Year's to ski, skate and otherwise play in the snow. I wanted to go, but I didn't know how to ski and had no outdoor clothing appropriate to be out in the snow. No ski jacket, pants or boots. I declined the invitation, but my then girlfriend was really sad and asked why. I had to admit I didn't have the gear needed and I couldn't afford them. She then passed it on to her family, and when I visited them on Christmas Day, they led me to a room with 3 types of everything new with tags laid out on a bed for me to choose from. It was a wonderful gesture, but I had mixed feelings. I appreciated the gear very much, but I felt like a charity case. Also, managing expectations of my wife for travel and expectations with children's activities. She was used to jetting away whenever they felt like it and had her own horses growing up. That's just not an option for us. We do okay and we're happy, but horses are not financially viable. Everything was about the family's image. Everything. Didn't last long. Let me tell a story that I think will provide a nice contrast to the majority of the comments here. This story isn't mine, but that of a close friend's brother. So Joe went away to college and met Sarah there halfway through freshman year. They were on again off again for a few months before deciding to date seriously in junior year. They met each other's families on vacation or when they would come to visit their kids at school. By all accounts, Sarah's family was polite and nice and relatively laid back. Not a whiff of arrogance or anything like that. Fast forward to the end of senior year. Joe's paternal grandfather is on his deathbed and Joe desperately wants to go say goodbye. However, they go to school in a small town with a private airport. Think Cessnas. And the closest major airport is several hours away by car. And neither of them have a car. Said airport also didn't have a direct flight, so it would have been pushing 24 hours until he got to the hospice center to see his grandfather. This was destroying Joe, as he and grandpa were very close and he was essentially a second father to him. Without a word, Sarah pulled Joe into a cab and took him to the airport. Waiting for them was Sarah's family's private plane. Joe, and my friend and her family, were all astounded. They had no idea Sarah's family was wealthy, and especially not private plane wealthy. Anyways, off Joe went and he said goodbye and he flew coach back to school. Sarah never said a word about it one way or the other, and neither did Joe. They are now married and both doing well in their careers, and from what I can tell live a very normal life. But every once in a while they disappear off to some remote island or jungle or mountain for a few days a year and don't tell anyone but their family where they're going. I guess I had a different type than everyone else. We worked together and you wouldn't know she was rich unless you really got to know her. She worked as a diversion. Something to do and meet new people. She never looked at the price of anything. Had a $5,000 watch. Dolce & Gabbana glasses she would break at least once a month cause she's clumsy. Very humble. Very sweet and probably the hardest worker there. We were managers. The issue was that there was absolutely nothing we could do together that was new to her. She had more money and free time. Her bucket list was completed by 22. There was nothing new or fresh within my, I don't know the word, realm, ability. We got along great and I found out from a mutual friend she was excited to be with someone not using her or groveling cause she was OSADQ levels of rich. It was my pride I think that ruined it. Nothing she did. I had issues letting her pay for everything and I was unable to show her anything she hadn't seen. I stopped being fun because I couldn't wow or impress her and it got in my head. She was perfectly happy doing normal things, but it wasn't enough for me. I had to impress her. We lost contact years ago. I hope she's doing well. She was ducking awesome and deserves to be happy. Keeping up with her. She wanted to go on European trips, expensive vacations, expensive restaurants, etc. She made very good money and I was limited in my funds and had to spread it out. I couldn't just fly to the Caribbean at the drop of a hat. So, in turn, she left me for a guy who could edit. While that took off, I wasn't expecting to hear from so many people. Thanks you all. The thing is that I have money, a great career, etc. We dated for 2+ years and had a great time while together and did a lot stuff. As a matter of fact, she was probably the best GF I had ever had, but the underlying thing was that no matter what I always felt this feeling of not being enough. She doubled my salary if not a little more, in the 6 figures. In the end she admitted to wishing I had more financial freedom and that it bothered her. It hurt like hell to hear something so personally insulting from someone I loved. So she found someone who was in her tax bracket, so to speak. I lived in a pretty rich area of the Bay Area. My GF at the time was very rich for this already wealthy area, but she truly had no concept of money. Her budget was $12,000 a month. Her family bought her a brand new Porsche because her car was 5-year-old BMW M5. It was honestly like dating an alien. Any issues I had in everyday life were just so far out of her life experience. Edit. She had a trust fund that paid out $12,000 a month. Edit 2. If I had $10 for every person asking if she is single still and if they could have her number, I would have a trust fund of my own that pays out $12,000 a month. I dated a senator's daughter in high school. Everything was about keeping up appearances and we had to be careful where we went in public and stuff like that. Her parents offered to get me nicer clothes to wear when we went to dinner in public, but I felt weird about it. Relationship didn't last long. I'm not good at being political. I married one. Nothing to do with my wife at all. She's a gem. It's my Mills expectations and image are always the center of just about every single decision. Phil, the real rich person, is cool as hell, though. If you're coming from a very poor family, as was my case, expect a lot of butting of heads when it comes to financial issues. I was raised very poor. Now I make a decent amount of money, but if I'm ever in a situation where I have a lot of expenses and may run into financial issues, I tend to panic a little bit and plan my spending extremely carefully. My wife came from a wealthy family and she never had to deal with financial struggles at any point in her life. And she doesn't quite care about spending a lot of money. Basically she doesn't think past the fact that we can't afford something. She doesn't think about possibly needing money in the future, and that's where we always butt heads. In short, make sure you ask her to let you know before she spends more than X amount. That was the solution we came up with and it has actually saved us from a lot of financial trouble. Spending should be a thing you both agree on, otherwise it's not going to work out. I dated a pretty rich girl. Her dad was a prominent lawyer, her mom a successful artist, and her uncle was a 1980s pop star. Honestly, they were great people to be around. They were old money and not snotty or overly pretentious. Yes, they had a big ass old house and drove quality, not overly flashy, cars. Yes, they had whatever they wanted, but not at all in a look at me type way. I on the other hand was dirt poor. I mean, in the early 90s grunge was a blessing for me because I looked like that already. But her parents didn't care and we're always very welcoming. Her mom even took me to my first punk show. I guess it's true when they say cash screams and wealth whispers. I was an aspiring lawyer and she an aspiring artist. She came from a rich family and I grew up in a bad socio-economic area. My parents were refugees back in the 70s. Basically never knew how rich she was until I went to her hometown for her brother's wedding. Apart from the amazing apartment her parents had, they had an empty apartment in the downtown area for guests that I could sleep in. Easily the fanciest place I've stayed at. Oh, and her older brother that was in the family business had to go tour the factories they owned to do something. Relationship started to take a hit when her dad blamed me for his daughter's dreams of being an artist. I only made her believe in herself and to choose her destiny herself instead of letting her parents force her into the family business. She changed her major from business management to art without me knowing, and her parents freaked out and blamed me for it. I couldn't really handle the drama in law school, so we ended things. Last time I checked her out she was in an art school somewhere in Europe. Seems like she's still living the dream. Edit. Just to clarify, I didn't want to break a happy home or anything. My ex had severe anxiety and depression about her major that her parents chose for her. She was never happy at uni and that's why we talked about her choosing her own life. Second edit. While this blew up, never watched the movies people are typing as comments. Seems like a lot of movies have the same premise as my story and people are me telling me I'm lying. I'm really not. I didn't want to put out too many details cause I don't wanna out me or her in some way. In the end you believe what you want to believe. She was always doing something. Constantly going on trips. Or to the openings of expensive restaurants. Or traveling to her parents' vacation house. Or getting tickets for some opening night or something. It was frankly exhausting. She had money and she wanted to spend it. And I just couldn't keep up. I say had because it was entirely her parents' money. She was in grad school, though she was struggling at it, and otherwise had absolutely no work or experience. Outside of a restaurant, she barely had any life experience either. The feeling that you'll always be living on the coattails of the family rather than making your own way in the world. I dated a girl from a wealthy family when I was in college and I was very poor. The most frustrating thing for me was that our definition of a crisis was so different. From month to month I would literally not know whether I could afford my rent or be able to put gas in my car, and she would be freaking out about some, to me, minor social issue or whether a store carried a fashion brand she liked. It definitely made things difficult, and I had to remember that it's your perspective that dictates what is a crisis and what isn't. It was honestly a lesson I've tried to remember over the years. She wasn't super rich, but she had a cushy media related job and a decent sized flat in the city center with modern deco and amenities. I just felt so insecure. Here's me, at the time, with manual labor job, bewildered at the price of food and drink at this place she suggested. You are cute 4.50 a pint and you are cute 15 for a paper thin pizza looking thing. I could tell she was happy in life with a job she loved. Her life was set. We still had a good night in the end. We had a few drinks and the night had a happy ending. We talked for a while afterwards, but it just kinda fizzled out. I often thought back to that date and thought I could be like her if I just put my mind to it and get out of the city dead-end job. Now I'm studying at university for a chance at a career I can be proud of. I dated a girl in college that came from a very wealthy family. Texas oil money. Like, she flew from Dallas to Florida, where we went to school, in her daddy's business jet. That kinda rich. I think the biggest thing for me was how out of touch she was with everyday money issues. For example, someone smashed into my car in the parking lot and I was totally upset about it. She was like, "It's okay. You can just get a new one." She had no concept of how insurance or deductibles work, and she didn't understand that I could not simply go out and get it fixed right away. Another example was that she wanted me to go to Miami to see a U2 concert with her. She had like front row tickets. I couldn't go because I had to work. She didn't understand that my boss would not give her it about how cool it would be to see U2. This was before they sucked. Man, I'm just always afraid that she gets the wrong idea. That I'm with her for what she is, not for who she is. That her parents can't accept me unless if I learn the same as her. I almost never accept gifts from her, which kinda sucks cause it makes her sad sometimes. Overall, it's great if you love her. Girl or boy, their most realistic fear is that anyone who shows interest in them is doing so only because of their money. That's why the more well off someone is, the more low key they are about it. Those who aren't low key get devoured by human sharks very quickly. I married a wealthy girl and it was weird at first. Luckily I make a 6-figure salary, so I didn't feel completely out of my element, but I remember the first time her parents invited us to the country club in the summer. My, at the time girlfriend, wife asked me what I was going to wear and I was baffled. At that point I just wore jeans, t-shirts, flannels and gym shorts. I had a great collection of shoes, but they were basically boots, flip-flops or Vans tennis shoes. I didn't play golf, but I did play a bunch of disc golf with stoners. I had to go out, buy new outfits, learn proper silverware techniques and all that. Years later I've become very close with her family, but at one point I had to stand up and draw a line in the sand which basically said I'm never going to pop my collar, wear dress shoes with jeans or join this country club. I'm always going to smoke weed, own a pit bull or 2, and stay home on Sunday mornings. But I will make sure your daughter has the best life I can possibly provide her. Now we're very close and they feel bad because they're itty grandparents and money can't help them with that one. You probably can't impress her with gifts. You being wealthy will likely not make her any more attracted to you. She's already secure. Being an original individual and a unique person is pretty much all you have to do. She has to like you for you. This is probably gonna get buried, but I've always wanted to write it out. I was never sure how rich she was. I just knew her family had property in a couple places in the US and China. And this is also how I found out property in China is dumb expensive. When she went for the holidays, if she wanted to say, stay in Shanghai and then go to Beijing later, she didn't have to look at hotels or Airbnb. She just had to make sure she grabbed the right set of keys. It was weird. She wasn't dripping with designer clothes and drove a fuel-efficient compact, but just looking at where her family had apartment houses, I can only imagine. She was a super sweet, down-to-earth girl, biggest heart in the world, very hard-working, and acted like a child in a candy shop everywhere she went. I think the biggest strain came when we would eat together. For me, money was tight, and the best way to stretch my college scholarship money was to cook meals in bulk. Before she met me, she ate out literally every single meal. At first, it took some adjusting and rebudgeting. Bless her heart, she understood and found compromises. She loved my cooking and would surprise me with groceries and then say I have to pay her back by cooking whatever she wanted. Every once a while she'd pick up the entirety of a bill that we were supposed to split, but she always found a way to make sure I didn't feel down about it. I don't think she ever once bought me an expensive gift. Most things were either handmade or were very thoughtful. For example, shoes I'd been eyeing for months but couldn't afford, and she noticed them in my computer browser. I miss that girl. I hope she's doing well. I once dated a girl who lived in Beverly Glen, near Bel Air. I lived in Canoga Park at the time, down in the valley. She would come down the hill and I'd take the bus to meet her in Sherman Oaks. Biggest struggle was getting some alone time at her house. What with her house manager, parents assistant, and caretaker around at all times. This was when I was 17. It lasted for almost a year. She had to go to college. Syracuse Ike. Edit. I guess this was interesting to some people. Lol. They don't understand the cost of money. I am dating a girl who has never wanted for anything. Her parents put $100k in her account one year just for spending money. She wants to go out to eat all the time. Constantly. I am trying to make my freelance company work, which has been profitable, but still not making that much money. And she's eating all of my money. We pay separately, but still. Going out every night to expensive sit-down places is ridiculously expensive. I'm at my wit's end about it. I like her, and she's nice, but I've literally almost gone broke just due to eating food out with her, and I'm about to do so again. I've spent at least $2k on food over the past month. I don't want to go out to eat. I can spend $10-20 in a week for food and be satisfied. She wants to spend $70 plus dollars a day for food. I had to eat rice and vegetables for weeks because I was so broke, because she wants to go to fancy dinners on other weeks. I have had a talk to convince her not to do this and why don't we eat it instead, and even offered to cook. But it's just super difficult to convince her to do this. I dated this girl while in college. She never mentioned anything. She lived a simple life until I went to her family's place for Thanksgiving. Right off the bat, her mom did not like me. I respect everyone, but if you try me, I go hard. Her mom told me that she would feel more comfortable if she had my social security to do a check on me, to make sure I am not a felon or something. I asked her for her social security to make sure her money was legit and that if me and her daughter had kids, they wouldn't end up having grandparents in jail. We are not together now. It was good at first, but then she got too far. But yeah, no, it don't matter anyway. She can rely on the old man's money. Their family will look down on you. Every event becomes a D-swinging contest that you can't afford the admission fee to. I'm not very rich, but I'm a girl who definitely comes from a more well-off family than my boyfriend does. I would say I am upper middle class. His family gets by, but they have financial troubles now and again. He seems to have no idea how to manage money. Starbucks, eating out, movies, all the time. When I had to buy a car, I bought a used but dependable Toyota, paid full price. He bought a brand new BMW that he can only afford to pay in installments. That's another thing that bugs me. For all big purchases, laptop, car, etc., He pays in installments. I was always taught that, excepting really big purchases like a house or such, only buy things you can afford to pay full price for at the time. It saves money and curbs your spending habits. I pay for all the dates, but I'm getting tired of eating out and tips and always getting appetizers, drinks, and dessert. Over the course of our relationship, I've learned to spend a lot more and he's learned to save more. But there is still a discrepancy, using my throwaway account. Edit. Not rich but more than middle class. Meeting the people she knows. It's hard to talk about my average self when my audience is a collection of some of the most gifted, driven, accomplished people I've come across. For instance, the first friend she introduced me to, one had temporarily quit healthcare, traveled the world making a documentary and then spent 6 months delivering healthcare in some third world country, returning a few weeks before we met, and the other had entered into sports journalism and is very quickly climbing the ladder to one of the most reputable newspapers of the nation. After hearing them share these interesting stories about each other, it came to me. I'm sat there, trying my best to make I fixed up a rental property, then spent 4 hours a night studying every day of the past couple months. Sound interesting? This happens almost every time. Theoretical physicists, accomplished sportsmen, artists, and a lot of medical students, professionals. Then me, a glorified white van man with aspirations on something I should have studied 7 years earlier, instead of going straight into the workforce with a forklift license. Gift giving during holidays, birthdays. Being given a $600 camera while I give you a $50 purse or equivalent gift sucks a lot. Dated the daughter of multimillionaires for 3 years. I'm a working class lad from Yorkshire. She was Sunni Muslim and I'm non-religious. Grew up strict Christian though. Her dad didn't like me. I have tattoos and piercings which he despised. Her mum was lovely. The Muslim thing wasn't an issue to them. The fact I was a different nationality and wasn't rich was the biggest issue. The relationship was great but she was so spoiled and entitled, but because I'm the type to call people out on their bullet it kind of worked well. She needed someone to tell her no, which she'd never had before. We nearly got married but eventually we broke up. There was a lot of pressure from her family and she's with a Muslim guy from her home country now, which I guess was inevitable. Weirdly enough, she's one of 4 wealthy girls I've dated, and here is the biggest issue with dating rich girls, and why I'll probably never do it again. They think they can just throw money at you and it'll solve all the problems. No affection, ridiculous entitlement, inability to communicate, and the depth of a puddle. Give me a working class lass that's up for a laugh anytime over that it. I have literally no idea, but I'd like to find out. It's very hard to give a concrete answer. Some are anxious about their self-image of dating someone from a lower class, while others don't mind. The true answer is, it depends on the girl. Had relatively high-powered job, pretty high income, expected me to want to strive for the same, consistently harassed me to get a different job. I was, and am, happy at my job, and her type of work would be my hell. Edit. I was a software tester. She was a business analyst. Finding ways to get into her will. They live in a bubble sometimes. They sometimes don't understand that struggle of even the middle class. My girlfriend doesn't ask her dad for money, but occasionally if she needs something she can ask. Her education will be paid for, and she says you should only have 1 or 2 kids or else you can't afford their education. She doesn't understand that my parents can't afford even 1 kid's education. Yeah, my parents did alright, but they can pay for my entire education. A discussion we have is that she sometimes doesn't understand that she is well off, cause she went to private school. She was quite average. In my experience, gifts seem to be the language of love, both giving and receiving. She would buy me things and tell me how much I meant to her, and she expected the same in return. I was by no means poor, but my father believed in a strong work ethic, taught money management, so when I went to college he only paid tuition and said I had to pay for everything else. I learned a minimum wage job makes just enough for a roof and ramen. She didn't understand that I couldn't afford gifts all the time. Also, not being able to take her out to eat, to the movies, out on the town in general on a weekly basis was a big deal. At the same time, you can't blame her, it was how her family communicated their feelings. We were both young and hadn't lived life yet. I haven't talked to her in almost 15 years. I really hope she has learned that love is not a gift purchased but is something conveyed through speech and actions to show you're so. She had no self-realization of our financial differences and how that means experiences in our lives are drastically different. She lives in Texas and would fly to Nick for the weekend, go to Hawaii, California or Florida on a whim. When she asked me what I wanted, I was always really mega because that's how I live. I don't need the most expensive item, but for her, that was all or nothing. Eventually she learned to respect and almost envy my way of living. She enjoyed my simple life. But then it turned out she was a total sociopath, so she may not be the best example of dating a rich girl either. And people weren't gifting her things, she would just use her daddy's black credit card to get it. She was a very selfish woman. Her dad's money always comes before you. Lack of sensitivity to price. I was a grad student at a private university, dating an undergrad. So her family was loaded and I was making like 18k a year. Go to a restaurant. She'd always pick nice places. And boom. Appetizer. Drinks. Most expensive thing on the menu. Without even second thought. Not maliciously but just because that's what she wanted. But then since I'm the guy, I'd pay. Like itch, I have $25 a week for groceries. What are you doing? They will eventually leave you to travel the world while you work hard for an education and a career to be self-sufficient. It's so annoying when a girl doesn't realize that she's from affluence, but then looks to you for leadership and making decisions. I dated this one that had this awesome house, and her parents' theory on life was that they had to keep up with the Joneses. She wanted sex and to hang out, but then would say she was feeling herself pulling away. A lot of mixed signals. She openly said she wanted validation, which isn't sexy emo, but I was willing to work on it. When I talked about normal life struggles, she had no talking point or anything to contribute. Constantly balancing their lifestyle expectations with your salary. I went through it as a 23-year-old making $42k in Manhattan. A carefree weekend without pre-gaming can blow your entire monthly discretionary income. My wife didn't tell me about any of the money stuff until right before we got married. I knew that her family was pretty well off because I had traveled with them a few times, but I honestly had no clue what it was all like. Like someone else said, crisis has a completely different meaning. We only live off of what we make now. Any money in any other accounts are for very specific purposes. Down payment for a house, car savings. I feel very fortunate that I married into a family that knows the right way to handle money and doesn't act rich.